mashgiach of your own house.
Right.
That's a full-time job.
That's a great point. Really, the Torah, it says, Eid Echad Ne'eman B'Yisurin. Here we are, we're learning the Gemaras about cooking and what are you allowed to do before Shabbat? What type of foods can you leave on a fire or on a fire, on a blech? But in truth, every person, every religious person, every person who keeps Torah and mitzvot, keeps Shabbat, they're believed to say that their food is kosher, right? You could eat in anybody's house, technically, that's an observant Jew. There's no mashgiach on the house. There's no mashgiach. They don't have a personal mashgiach. Now, if a person thinks they're observant, but they're religious, but they don't really know the laws, therefore that's a different problem. So you can't, you want to eat in the house, but they don't even know it. They don't know much about meat and dairy, so that will be an issue. You know what I'm saying? To eat in their house. But anybody who's basically religious and knows the laws, you could trust them that they as long as they know the law, that generally speaking, there's basic laws that people know that the food should be that they buy from kosher stores and how they separate meat and milk um, and then even when you come to the house for Shabbat, it's important to know if they know that they should be aware of the basic law of the laws, right? And so I would say usually religious people know the laws of the kitchen to know how they prepare the food before Shabbat. You know, they're not leaving food because, again, you would have the question if they leave food on a fire before Shabbat, right? We're going to see if it was not 50% cooked, then that food should be forbidden for you to eat on the Shabbat. If they left food on a fire which is more than 50% cooked, so then we have Hananiah's opinion that would say it's permitted. So you have different opinions on that matter. But the more common and the Ashkenaz custom seemed to have been lenient for that, if it was 50% cooked. That we're not afraid you're going to come to turn on stove, raise the knobs. But that's the issue. If it's not fully cooked and if it's not fully cooked and deteriorating, if it's didn't reach that level, then there's a concern. The Rabbanan say we're afraid you might come to stoke to raise the fires, right? So if anybody wants to be lenient like Hananiah and just puts food on a fire before Shabbat when it's not fully cooked directly on the fire, then and it's let's say 50% cooked, by the time sun goes down, I would say best thing would be also to cover the knobs. So then if you cover the knobs of the stove, so that would be, the concern that the rabbis have that you might come to raise the fire. The way we stoke fires today is not by stoking it with a piece of wood. We stoke a fire by raising the flame. I'm saying if the common custom, I would say, is that people don't leave food directly on a fire before Shabbat. I don't think that's the common custom, to my knowledge. I mean, I haven't done a survey. People use a blech that covers the fire, and that will serve as a reminder not to raise the fire.
But I mean, a flat as opposed to the hot plate that doesn't have a knob at all.
Okay, what doesn't have a knob?
Yeah, the plate that you would just plug in
Right.
instead of using the actual stove.
Right. So people use the hot plate, but they want to avoid. I presume that's why the custom. I think a lot of communities, I think in the Sephardic community, it sounds like a lot of people just use the hot plate, and because they are lenient by using a hot plate, because the hot plate has only one temperature,
Right.
so they put that on before Shabbat, because if it has only one temperature, they're not so concerned that you're going to come to stoke the coals,
Right.
because you don't have the ability to really stoke it, change the temperature. But if you have something that has multi-temperatures, if it's a hot plate, so now we're getting into what do we say about that? Can I leave food on a hot plate that has multi-temperatures that didn't reach 50% of its cooking by the time the Shabbat came. So that would be more of a question because the same way I can't leave something on a fire if it didn't reach 50%. I mean, according to all opinions, it didn't reach 50% of its cooking, if it's less than 50% or 33%, depending on, there is an opinion that says 33, as long as it reached 33%. But let's say if we're more strict, it has to reach 50% before Shabbat. If you want to leave it on a flame, so it would seem if you have a hot plate that has that ability to be adjusted, there's room to say that you would not be able to leave food on that hot plate if it didn't reach 50% before Shabbat. Then what do most people do is that they actually, it's fully cooked before Shabbat. That's the norm. And that's the best thing. Because once something is fully cooked before Shabbat, now the only thing is it getting better? Meaning, then you get into that next question that we're discussing. Something is fully cooked. You can't put something that's fully cooked. It would seem something that's fully cooked on a fire, directly on a fire, that if it's improving, so that, again, that would be also an argument, because there's, again, Hanania, the more lenient opinion says, you can put it on a fire if it's 50% cooked. So certainly you can put on a fire 100% cooked and improving. So, but even in the more strict opinion that says, even if it's 100% cooked, if it's improving while it's on the fire, but there's a case to be made that the hot plate, being that the fire you don't see, it's covered with the plate. So maybe you can make a case to say that it's not really that level of an open flame, and therefore there's more room to be lenient, even if it's improving when it's on that hot plate. So they over here in this Yalkut Yosef, this Yalkut Yosef Saka edition, right? They discuss this this about the hot plate. Let's see about this hot plate. Good morning. Okay, so let's see what he says. He says, all the above, he brings the two opinions, but then he says this discussion is if you leave food on a fire where it's possible to raise or lower its intensity. So there we have an argument. If it's 50% cooked on a fire directly, can you leave food that's 50% that reach 50%? Lower than 50%, you can't leave. But if reach 50% or more, can you leave it on a fire directly? Right? That was an argument in the Gemara. Is that correct? But he says this applies to leaving a pot of food on a fire where it's possible to raise or lower its intensity. If one leaves the food on an electric warming tray, where one has no potential to raise the heat, there's no need to cover its surface with anything.
Right.
Because the entire reason for covering the fire is to remind the person not to raise the heat, and this is not applicable to this warming tray. Even if one uses a warming tray with different settings for different temperatures, okay, now he's already entertaining a different, a type of thing that has multiple settings. I mean, today's day and age, I would think as time goes on, I bet they're constantly making with more settings. You always have to outdo, you always have to do the previous.
Yeah, but that's what the only ones that people have are like specifically Jewish ones.
Right. Okay. But I'm saying, but I want, but people might not everyone might be aware of the dynamics of why it works. Why the ideal that is to have only one setting.
Right.
When you go into the store, I want an electric tray with a hot plate with one setting.
Oh yeah, if it's not a Jewish brand, it probably doesn't exist.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe.
I would think the world would have such a thing. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't use such a thing now.
Right. So that's very good. So then he says, even if one uses a warming tray with different settings of different temperatures, if it is made specifically for Shabbat use and is not used for weekday cooking, the surface of the tray itself is considered the cover over the heating element. Therefore, one may place food directly onto the tray before Shabbat and leave it there until one wishes to eat. Because we're going to look at this, they're going to consider it as if it's covered. One may leave food on it at any stage. Because if it's covered, then there's no concern of you. What's the problem? Why can't you leave food at 20%, 25%? You might come to stoke it, but there's nothing to stoke. In this type, they're going to, if it has only one setting, there's nothing to stoke. And even if it has multiple settings, that they're going to, he's being lenient by saying that since the fire is, it's not the normal way of cooking that you would stoke. This is just a way of just warming, leaving it as is, not made to, even though you could question this, but the fact it has multiple settings, maybe you're going to change the setting. But so I would say the best, what if it's a warming tray that has multiple settings, what should you do? Cover the knobs before the Shabbat. And therefore, there are people that even when they have a blech on, there are some people that cover the knobs as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes the blech, they make, when I was growing up, the blech covered the fires, but it did not cover the knobs.
They didn't stick out.
Right. Today's day and age, the blech is a flat metal over the fire
Yeah.
and comes, and then there's another piece that comes down that covers that blocks that it's like, what do you call it? It's like an L or something. What I don't know what you
Yeah,
what
curve.
curves. The curve that's coming besides the flat sheet. There's another piece of metal that's come down and covers the knobs that are over here. It's clear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That I would say is the ideal blech to get. You might not be required to get that blech because you could say I cover the fires with the the Gemara, the Gemara does not talk about the Gemara, the case of the Gemara is cover the fire. But you can see people that cover the fire, but with the blech, but there's sometimes before Shabbat, you look underneath, and so I'm saying so maybe that might create a situation that why that blech is not the perfect, because usually when the idea of covering a fire, you can't stoke it. But the fact that if you cover the fire, but you could still have the ability to raise the temperature by turning the knob wasn't covered. So I'm saying that could be that's the question in the poskim and the rabbis is covering the fire enough, or you should have to cover the knobs as well. I think they say in the neighborhood of Moshe Feinstein, the way I was growing up, and I was growing up in his neighborhood, you didn't need to cover the knobs. Just cover the fire.
Yeah.
But I hear the case. I can hear a case why, based on our learning, I hear a case why people should. I would say the smarter thing is to cover the knobs as well. Get a blech that covers the knobs, or before Shabbat, put a piece of tinfoil on top of the knobs. You know what I'm saying? That would be a big thing because that would take away remind you that you can't, don't touch. Danger, fire, don't touch. Like my little joke, right? You know what I'm saying? So he says, according to this opinion, that they even if it has multiple stages, this warming tray, they they are lenient if you don't use it for cooking during the week. Only for Shabbat, there are those that are lenient. He says he at least is lenient and leave food on it at any stage. Whether it's completely cooked before Shabbat begins or half cooked, even if the food has just begun to cook when Shabbat begins. And they write on the bottom, this halacha has been like reviewed and gone through, and sounds like they wrote the word reconstructed. Reconstructed, a big word. Reconstructed by Rabbi Yisrael Beton, who's the author of this, with the consent and approval of Rav Yitzchak Yosef, one of the son of Rabbi Yosef. So it might be that in early editions, there might have been something that might have been a little bit different or might have been clarified as much. But this is what he's saying over here, with the consent of the author, which, you know, is not so simple. It's a big novel idea. You have a warming tray, has the ability to cook, but you don't use it during the week. You can put food on any stage before Shabbat. But that's what he's saying. But again, what is the best thing to avoid a lot of things is to have the food fully cooked before Shabbat. You know what I'm saying? You get away, you remove a lot of issues. You know, well cooked before Shabbat. Um, so he says, if someone transgresses the halacha and leaves directly on the fire a pot of food that is only slightly cooked at the time the Shabbat began, you can't eat. No one can eat from that food on the Shabbat. We're gonna get the Gemara's gonna discuss this. We didn't discuss this yet. If you did it, the guy did what he didn't do the right thing. What's the law with the food? We're gonna get into. All the poskim agree that if the pot of food has been completely cooked before Shabbat begins, and from now on, any cooking is detrimental to the flavor of texture, one may leave it directly on the fire. Now you have to add, I want to ask you, Adam, how many foods that are fully cooked that you put on the fire before Shabbat, by leaving it there, it's detrimental. I mean, if you would make it any further cooking, if the fire would be raised, most meat, if you're on a certain fire, if you would raise it, if it's fully cooked, that's what you're saying. Yeah, I don't know. I'm saying, but if whatever that food is, sometimes I think of sometimes a soup
Yeah.
because it's just cooking out. Though if you raise the fire, if you fire, you don't want to raise the fire because it's it's at a perfect. It's gonna just evaporate more of the soup. So that could be that. So that would be a type of food perhaps that you could leave on directly on a fire when Shabbat comes. Now it's not a good idea because there's other issues we're going to see. Because let's say if I take a pot, once I take the pot off the fire, even if I'm holding it, I can't put it back. Say if it's an open flame, I can't put it back on. I can't put it back. Right? We have the thing. If you have something, and you can't take food out of a refrigerator on Shabbat, fully cooked food, and put it on a fire that's not covered. So if you want to take a piece of deli or southern fried chicken on Shabbat and you want to put it on a blech, that's covering the fire. So according to the Sfardim would allow you to take a fully cooked food on the Shabbat, and if it's a solid, not a liquid, you could put it on top of the blech. Why? Because you're not cooking, because it's already cooked. You're warming it up. You're warming so it's ready, and it doesn't look like you're cooking because the fire is covered. That's not the way people cook. So that's what I would understand Sephardim do on Shabbat, that they take food from refrigerator that's dry. When I say dry, I mean non-liquid, I mean
Yeah.
food. But now liquid, they're more strict. Even though the liquid was already cooked before Shabbat, they will not take a soup on Shabbat that was fully cooked and put it on top of the blech.
So how do you get the soup?
Right. So the only way they would have to eat up the soup is only before Shabbat, leaving it on the blech before Shabbat would be the way they would heat up soup. There's no way anything that's liquidy, they would not.
Oh, that's why oh, the- they cook. the big cylinder that stays on the whole all of Shabbat. The slow cooker, the crock pot.
The crock pot.
The only reason that's okay is because it's plugged in before
It's
Shabbat.
plugged in before Shabbat.
So if you're gonna cook the liquid, it has to be through something like that that stays on the whole time.
Right. Anything that's liquidy, you can't